Hi everyone, my name is John McCartney and today I'm going to be teaching about scope. So before we get started, there are a few important terms that we need to get familiar with. The first one is global variables. So global variables are variables that are not declared within a function body. Typically these are going to be variables that are constants and used multiple times throughout a program. So these are going to be declared before main. Next, we have our local variables. Now these variables are going to be any variables that are declared within a function body. So this function could be main or any function that you write. So these are just some important terms that you need to know. Now, scope is whether or not a variable is accessible at any particular point in your code. To say that something is in scope in a particular part of your code means that the variable is able to be referenced and used. So you can type out the name of a variable and you'll be able to use the data associated with that. So there are two types of scope. Local scope, which is the scope of a local variable. This will be from the point of declaration to the ending curly brace of whatever function that it was declared in. Also, an important note is that a local variable scope is only within the function that it was declared inside of. Then this note will come in handy later. Then the other type of scope is global scope. This is the scope of a global variable. This is from the point of declaration to the very end of the program. So, with this in mind, let's do some examples. So, for our first example, we just have our main program. So we'll just run through this line by line and see what goes on. So, first line, we have int a equals 7. Okay. So I'll just draw a little diagram of what's going on to see how this scope is into working. So let's say this box represents main, and inside main we have a variable a that has a value of 7. Alright, next line, int b equals 3, so this creates a variable b in main with a value of 3. So now at this point we can say that inside of main a and b are in scope. So when we execute a line like cout a plus b and then an end line, this is valid because a and b are both in scope. However, when we go to the next line, we cout a c, but there is no c that was previously defined in the main function, so there is no c in scope, so we cannot cout c since there's no variable c to cout. However, if we moved this line past this next line, then we would have a c that was declared, and now this c with a value of a plus b, which is 10, would now be in scope, so now this line would become valid. So this is just a short example of how scope works in main. Now, the second example, it's a little more complex. So again, let's just draw a diagram. This is main. So first line, create a variable a, the value of 2. Second line, create a variable b, the value of 3. Then we call a function that we previously implemented that has two parameters, x and y, so we pass in a for x and b for y. So what this is doing is within another function, so we can say this scope is separate from main. It creates a variable x which has the value of a, which is 2, the variable y which has the same value as b, which is 3. So now within this function, x and y are in scope, so you can use x and y and use the data associated with these variables. So first line, we have int temp equals x. So we have another variable created, temp. This has a value of x, which is 2. X equals y. So we just set x to be 3. And y equals temp. So now temp equals 2. So now y equals 2. So these are all fine. So temp, x, and y are in scope. However, when we get to the last line, since foo is separate from main, and a and b are local variables of main, this means that they're only in scope for the portion of main after which they were declared. So since we're in foo, a and b are not in scope of foo, so this line is not valid. So we can't execute this line of code. Furthermore, if this function were to run, if we cout x, there is no variable x in the scope of main, so this would also be invalid. Finally, say we have some function main, we create an array of integers of size 4. Alright. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Then we have a for loop. So inside this for loop we have an integer I that's declared. We have our condition I is less than 4, and then we have our increment. So this just couts all the values in the array. Now, when we declared I here, it was declared within the for. So this is a local variable with a local scope within for. So as soon as we reach the ending brace for for, this I variable goes away and we no longer have access to it. So when we reach this line of code here, cout I no longer exists and it's no longer in scope, so we can no longer use the data associated with I, so this line of code is invalid. Right, well, that was a short introduction of scope, and thank you for listening.